In the deep shadows of the once vibrant den, the alpha cub lay curled up, its tiny form barely disturbing the thick layer of leaves that blanketed the floor. The den, now silent and abandoned, echoed with the ghostly memories of its pack. A primitive sense of loss gnawed at the cub, a painful awareness of the absence of its father, the alpha. Alone, cold, and scared, the cub was the sole heir of a once formidable pack, each member now fallen in the battle against the relentless undead. This young lichen, despite its tender age, harboured a feral and commanding primal rage inherited from its lineage, a true blood, lichen destined for greatness, if it could survive the harsh realities of its new world. After a day of waiting in vain for the return of any pack member, hunger drove the cub from the relative safety of its ancestral den. Its small body trembled with both fear and the biting cold, yet the drive to survive pushed it forward into the unknown. As the alpha cub ventured out into the daunting expanse of the forest, it was overwhelmed by the vastness and the eerie silence, punctuated only by the distant calls of predators and the rustle of leaves underfoot. The loneliness was palpable, each step taking it further away from the only home it had ever known, and deeper into the wilderness. Despite its size and weakness, the cub carried the traits of its alpha heritage. It wasn't long before its keen nose picked up the scent of food, meat, fresh and tantalizingly close. Driven by a mix of hunger and the primal instinct to survive, the cub raced toward the source of the smell. Its heart pounded with both excitement and fear as it neared the promise of sustenance. Suddenly, it saw it, a fresh-cut piece of raw meat just lying on the ground, seemingly unguarded. With no thought other than to quell its gnawing hunger, the cub pounced on the meat, its small teeth sinking into the flesh. But as it did, a net swiftly enveloped it, trapping it within a wire mesh. The shock and betrayal sent the cub into a panic, and it yelped and cried, its cries echoing hauntingly through the forest. From the underbrush, a group of hunters emerged, laughing amongst themselves as they approached their catch. "We got something," one exclaimed with a grin, pulling the net closer to inspect their prize. As they lifted the cub from the ground, their amusement turned to bewilderment. "This little fella won't feed us," one of the hunters remarked, disappointment lacing his words. "Ah well, wrap it up, maybe it will come in use. If not, we can throw it in the lake," he added dismissively. Just as they prepared to bag the cub, one of the hunters paused, his attention caught by something unusual. He turned toward a flicker of light in the distance, a brief glimpse of something shiny, like a mask. "What was that?" "Looked like something shining over there," he muttered, squinting into the dimming light. Then it was gone, as if it had never been there. The moment passed, and the hunters, shaking off the eerie feeling, focused on their captive. Unaware of the true value of the young lichen in their grasp, they continued with their plans, oblivious to the eyes that might still be watching them from the shadows. In a makeshift cage, the young werewolf cub shivered, its small body curled into a tight ball. Just beyond its reach lay a cut of meat, deliberately placed to taunt and tease the hungry creature. As members of the small hunting camp passed by, they kicked the cage, some even throwing rocks and stones at the frightened cub. "It was your kind that started all this," they sneered, echoing the sentiments of blame and anger towards the supernatural beings they held responsible for the chaos in their world. The cub, starving, scared and alone, shook with cold and fear. One man in particular, fueled by a personal vendetta, approached the cage with a venomous glare. "I lost everything because of those werewolves. I'll wring that one's neck," he swore, trying to reach through the bars, only to be held back by others who cautioned restraint. As the shadows lengthened and night fell over the camp, Someone moved the meat closer, placing it right at the bars of the cage. The cub, driven by hunger, quickly devoured the meat, its small body trembling as it ate hurriedly. The following morning, 2 men approached the cage with a cold, calculating look. "So this is it, eh?" one of the men remarked, eyeing the cub with disdain. The other man, smiling cruelly, nodded in agreement. "Well, we don't want it getting any bigger. Tie it up in that bag, put some rocks in there, and drop it in the lake," he suggested with a sinister grin. "Better do it tonight when no one's looking, in case someone gets annoyed that they couldn't kill it first," he added. As the 2 men walked off to prepare for the grim task, the camp suddenly fell into an eerie stillness. Every person froze in place, as if time itself had stopped. Fires still burned, and the wind still blew, but all human activity halted. Then, from the edge of the camp, a figure approached, the man in the chrome mask. He walked up to the cage, placing his hand through the bars without fear of the cub's bite. There, little one. I won't let them hurt you," Winter said soothingly as he opened the cage door. The cub's initial instinct was to attack, but something in its young heart stirred a sense of connection to the man. This was not an enemy or prey. This was pack, a friend, kin. "Come," Winter said gently, and the cub followed him trustingly. As they walked away from the camp, the cub turned back and gave a snarl towards the 2 men who had planned its grim fate. "Oh, those 2 wanted you to take swimming lessons, eh?" Winter remarked dryly. With a wave of his gloved hand, the 2 men suddenly collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Once Winter and the alpha cub were far enough away from the camp, Winter waved his hand again, and the small camp sprang back to life, oblivious to the brief pause in their existence. Winter and the cub continued into the forest, away from the dangers of the camp, embarking on a journey that would define the future of both their destinies. Miles from the perils of the outside world, Winter and the young cub arrived at his laboratory, a place cluttered with pieces of equipment salvaged from numerous research labs. The air was thick with the smell of metal and old electronics. In the center of the room stood a table on which lay the preserved head of a former foe, a necromancer whose demise had not ended his utility to Winter. Winter removed the probes from the head, turning his attention to the cub. "This one was interesting, but you are indeed fascinating," he remarked, his voice filled with a curious mix of admiration and scientific fervor. As he prepared to place probes on the cub, it growled, its primal instincts flaring in defense. However, Winter gestured soothingly, and the cub, sensing his intentions were not harmful, calmed down. It allowed Winter to attach the probes, a connection forming as if the cub recognized Winter as more than just an ally, perhaps even as kin. "Fascinating indeed," Winter murmured, as he began studying the creature more intently. Over the weeks that followed, Winter conducted continuous studies on the cub. His lab was a sanctuary of sorts, where the echoes of their past lives, a necromancer's insights, and a lichened cub's genetic secrets mingled in the quest for understanding. "I'm done," Winter finally declared after extensive research. He looked at the cub, now playfully rolling on the floor, completely at ease in his presence. "I see what you need," he said thoughtfully. "You need to be the alpha," he continued, his voice taking on a serious tone. Winter began to explain the significance of this revelation. If the line of the alpha is extinguished, it would not merely be the end of a bloodline, but could cause a shift in the balance of all supernatural beings. This shift could trigger a cascade of changes, destabilizing the balance of power among all entities, both supernatural and human. He further elaborated that the natural hierarchy among supernatural creatures ensured a balance in their interactions and influence in the world. The Alpha not only leads, but also stabilizes these interactions. Without a true Alpha, the order among your kind and the subsequent interactions with others would falter, potentially leading to chaos. Winter's explanation was grounded in a mixture of scientific understanding and supernatural lore, presenting a compelling case for the importance of maintaining continuity in the leadership of the Lycan. This was not just about power. It was about maintaining the equilibrium necessary to prevent a potential collapse of established supernatural structures. As Winter finished his explanation, the cub listened, its young mind absorbing the gravity of its potential role. Though it could not understand all the nuances, it felt a burgeoning sense of purpose under Winter's tutelage. Winter's laboratory had become a cradle of future possibilities, not just for the cub, but for the balance of power in the world teetering on the edge of unseen thresholds. Over the ensuing months, Winter took on the role of both protector and mentor to the cub, now rapidly maturing into its destined role as the Alpha. He not only ensured its safety, but also nurtured its growth, feeding it and even hunting alongside it in the dense forests that bordered their secluded hideout. As the days passed, Winter found himself as emotionally attached to the cub as it was to him, a bond forged not just of necessity, but of genuine affection and mutual respect. As the cub grew, Winter observed several changes in the werewolf Alpha. Its primal drive, rage, and ferocity were evolving. Curious about these developments and eager to test the young Alpha's capabilities, Winter decided it was time for a more challenging exercise. One evening, as dusk turned to night, he led the young werewolf back to the small hunter's camp, where it had been trapped many months ago. The site was quiet, the memories of past violence still lingering like ghosts among the trees. "Let's see what you can do," Winter said, quietly, gesturing towards the camp. As the now alpha werewolf entered, its presence alone stirred panic. Screams and cries filled the air briefly, abruptly cut off by a sudden, eerie silence. Winter followed after a few moments, stepping into the camp to find it eerily quiet. "Interesting," he mused aloud, looking around at the stillness that had overtaken the place. "None of these have changed to your kin, my friend. You need a pack. You must become Alpha." More time passed, and the once cub, now almost fully grown, the force of the Alpha's presence was palpable, its primal rage and commanding presence increasingly prominent. Acknowledging the need for the next step, Winter found a deep, dark cave and led the Alpha there. "You must stay here while I search for your kin. There must be some out there," Winter explained, his voice echoing slightly off the cave walls. In a sudden display of affection, and perhaps a test of dominance, the muscular, powerful Alpha dove at Winter, knocking him to the ground before rolling over to expose its stomach, a gesture of both playfulness and submission. No, not now," Winter said, gently pushing the Alpha away. "We can wrestle again when I return. I must find your kin before it's too late. Do not draw attention to yourself. I know you can handle yourself now, but we are not ready." Winter would be gone for days, leaving the Alpha to lay low in the cave, hidden from the outside world and the dangers it held. Then, one day, a familiar whistle cut through the quiet, the signal that Winter was back. "Nothing, I'm afraid, my friend," Winter reported upon his return, his face drawn with the fatigue of fruitless searching. "But we must not give up. You will be Alpha once more." As they settled back into the cave, the weight of their task lay heavily on them both, a reminder of the challenges they faced in restoring the Alpha to its rightful place and securing the future of its lineage. As evening fell, Winter's familiar whistle echoed through the cave, signaling a new challenge. "Come, I have a test for you," he called to the Alpha, his voice echoing off the stone walls. He led the growing werewolf to a small clearing nearby, where about 100 undead had wandered into the area, an inadvertent intrusion into their secluded world. "Show me what you can do against these," Winter instructed, standing back as he gestured towards the undead horde. The Alpha, now fully embracing its emerging status, initially did not comply. It was developing into a true Alpha, one that would not be commanded by anyone, not even by Winter, who had been its protector and mentor. This defiance was exactly what Winter had hoped to see. "Excellent," Winter said with a nod, a hint of pride in his voice. "You are getting stronger. Then simply take out your rage on these things, if you care to, my Alpha," Winter challenged, emphasizing ownership and the unique bond they shared. With that, the Alpha unleashed its fury. It surged forward with a burst of energy that seemed to come from the very earth itself. The undead, mindless and slow, stood no chance as the Alpha tore into them. In mere moments, the clearing was a scene of carnage, with the Alpha dispatching each undead with a brutal efficiency that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Winter watched on, his expression hidden behind his mask, as the primal rage took over the Alpha, transforming it into a force of nature that could not be stopped. The raw power and ferocity displayed were exactly what he had hoped to cultivate in the young werewolf. Back in the cave, Winter sat near a small fire as the Alpha paced back and forth. The air was thick with the scent of pine and the metallic tang of blood. "Yes, I feel it too, old friend," Winter spoke softly, almost reflectively. "The time is coming when we can no longer be friends, but I will find your kin. This I promise, sir." In that moment, the Alpha issued a commanding snarl at Winter, a primitive order that resonated deep within both of them. It was a challenge, a demand for respect and recognition of its power. The Alpha raised up, its primal energy overwhelming, filling the space between them with a palpable tension. "Yes, I knew this day would come. To be Alpha, you need to be the boss, right?" Winter acknowledged, his voice calm and even. For the first time, Winter removed his mask, allowing the Alpha to see his face, a gesture of trust and respect. The Alpha, sensing the significance of the moment, lowered its posture and walked up to Winter, then sat at his feet like a dog curling up with its owner, recognizing the bond they still shared. Winter replaced his mask, his movements deliberate. This moment had sealed their bond anew, not just as creator and creature, but as allies in a world that was constantly changing around them. Perched on a cold, wind-swept hill, Winter sat alone, gazing into the vast landscape stretched out before him. His eyes, keen and observant, scanned the horizon, while his hands busied themselves with marking segments on a map spread across his lap. "I know you're out there, and I will find you," he murmured to the chill air, his breath visible in the frosty morning. Suddenly, his sharp gaze caught a small anomaly in the usual emptiness of the landscape. A white car, rolling along the distant road. It came to a stop, and 3 figures disembarked. They started walking in a direction away from one of Winter's strategically placed safe houses. Watching them, Winter tapped into his unique abilities, connecting with the electromagnetic waves of brain waves. With a subtle manipulation, he influenced their thoughts. Suddenly, one of the trio suggested changing course, pointing in the direction of the safe house. "So easily controlled," Winter muttered with a hint of disdain, yet a flicker of satisfaction. He waited patiently as the trio entered the safe house, then approached. Standing at the front path, he announced, "It's okay. I know you're there. and you're only there because I allow it." The surprise and confusion on their faces were evident as they met him. After a brief conversation, during which the trio divulged the location of an outpost where Lycan lived, Winter felt a surge of urgency. He thanked them and left swiftly, making his way back to the cave. Upon arrival, he whistled before entering, signaling his presence to the Alpha, who awaited him with anticipation. "Good news, my friend. We have found your kin. You shall be Alpha again," Winter announced. He pointed in the direction of the outpost. "Meet me there. I'll go first to ensure it's safe," he instructed, noting the Alpha's eager growl of affirmation. "Yes, I know you want to rush in, but this will be the last thing I can do for you," he added, his voice heavy with a mixture of resignation and finality. They shared a moment of silent communication, a deep understanding passing between them. Winter was logical, calculating, and possessed an intelligence that sometimes seemed too advanced for his era, yet he felt a twinge of emotion, a rarity for him, as he contemplated this potentially being the last time he saw the Alpha, not just as a project, but as kin. Fueling the small Honda Fit, Winter set out towards the outpost. As he drove, he examined the new emotions stirring within him. "Interesting," he mused aloud. "I always wondered what that would feel like." His voice carried a hint of both wonder and melancholy. Back in the cave, the Alpha paced, the weight unbearable. It could feel the primal rage building within, the pull towards its kin, and the overwhelming drive to assert itself as the true Alpha. Every fiber of its being vibrated with the need to fulfill its destiny, to lead, to dominate, to become what it was born to be. The stage was set for a reunion that would shift the balances of power, for a confrontation that might define the future of the Lycan, and perhaps all those connected to them. The Alpha waited, bound by Winter's command, yet ready to explode into action. At the first sign, it was time to move. The Alpha could no longer contain its burgeoning primal urge. It was overwhelmed by the visceral connection to its kin. Without a second thought, it bolted from the cave, its paws pounding against the earth as it raced towards the direction Winter had indicated. The landscape shifted from lush green grass to snow-covered lands, a stark reminder of the changing world around it. But the Alpha's focus remained unyielded. With each stride, its primal rage swelled, driven by nature's call. As it surged through the icy woods, an innate sense of its kin strengthened. The Alpha felt a strange, compelling connection to these unknown Lycan. It could sense 8 werewolves. Somehow, it knew them intimately. It felt their emotions, their fears, and the bonds they shared, even though they had never met. The Alpha's journey became more than a physical run. It was a spiritual homecoming. Nature itself seemed to acknowledge the Alpha's formidable presence. Animals scurried away, and the very trees seemed to bend, clearing a path. "Run, hide, the Alpha is coming," the forest whispered in a chorus of rustling leaves and cracking branches. Days passed, and the Alpha's supernatural speed saw no match. It was an unstoppable force, propelled by the inexorable pull of the pack. Suddenly, amidst the blur of its journey, the Alpha looked up to see a familiar chrome face. Winter was there, camped on a small hill overlooking the path. For a moment, the Alpha's heart leapt. It wanted to run to him, to join its mentor, its father figure. But Winter pointed towards the camp, his head shaking subtly. The time for bonds was past. It was now time for the Alpha to fulfill its destiny. With a heavy heart, but an undeterred spirit, The Alpha ran past Winter, its gaze set firmly on the outpost. Standing alone on his hill, Winter was seen removing his mask and wiping something from his face, a rare show of emotion for someone so usually detached. He then turned and walked back towards his laboratory. His role as the guide was complete. It was time for the Alpha to reconnect with its pack and assume its rightful place as their leader. The Alpha approached the outpost with a mix of anticipation and readiness. The outpost lay ahead, visible now, a beacon pulling it forward. This was more than a return. It was a claim to its heritage and a step-in into the role it was born to fill. As the Alpha neared the outpost, its heart pounded, not just with exertion, but with the imminent meeting of its family. It was ready to lead, to protect, and to thrive as the true Alpha. The wilderness whispered of its return, and the moonlight cast a path, leading it home. The time had come for the Alpha to take its place at the head of the pack, to be Alpha once more. As the landscape blurs past the swiftly moving form of the Alpha, the air thick with the crisp scent of pine and impending snow, the tension across the land escalates. The outpost, a fragile bastion of humanity and lichen kinship, braces for what may come. Will the arrival of the true Alpha bring salvation or further chaos? Elder and Serana, with their dark machinations, have not been idle. Their plans to obliterate any resistance are nearing fruition, and the outpost might be their first casualty. With the undead forces still at their command, despite Winter's intervention, the question remains, will the Alpha arrive in time to thwart their sinister plans? Meanwhile, Winter, the enigmatic guardian of the Alpha, returns to his laboratory, his mind burdened with the weight of his actions and decisions. His attachment to the Alpha was unexpected, and now, with their paths diverging, he must reassess his role in this intricate tapestry of power. What moves will he make from the shadows to ensure the Alpha's success? As the Alpha races against time and destiny, its primal heart knows only the pull of its pack and the burning need to protect and lead, but the journey is fraught with peril and the outcome uncertain. The Alpha's arrival at the outpost is imminent, yet so many factors remain in flux. Will the Alpha find its pack in time to save them? Or will Elder and Serana's dark forces prevail? How will the dynamics shift when these powerful beings finally converge at the outpost? Prepare for a tale of epic proportions in Crimson Dawn, Series 2, Part 6, where the fate of the Alpha, the survival of the outpost, and the shadows cast by Winter's past actions will collide in a story of power, loyalty, and the eternal struggle for balance. Stay tuned as the saga continues to unfold, where every heartbeat and every growl writes the history of their world.